class, I'm Miss Highland, and today we're going to be learning about figures of speech. Have you guys ever heard of figures of speech before?
Yes.
Yeah? Can you give me any examples of those?
Well, when I was watching Shrek last night, he said something that was a simile, I believe.
A simile, okay.
And he said, ogres are like onions. They
That
have
is
lots
a
of
simile.
layers.
That's a very good simile. Have you heard any?
Yeah, I think when people say that
Do you want to go over some of them and then come back to that?
I can't think of any.
Okay, so I think first we're going to start with personification. So what personification is, and you guys can take notes if you'd like, we're going to have a worksheet to do, so keep that in mind. So personification is when you give inanimate objects a human-like quality. So an example of this would be when you say, like, the flowers danced in the wind. So flowers really can't dance, they don't have legs, they don't have arms, so there's no way for them to physically move and dance. But by saying that they dance in the wind, when you're reading or listening to something and they say that, you can picture what the flowers are doing. They're moving, they're swaying back and forth, and that's what they mean by dancing. So they're not literally dancing, it's a figure of speech, and that is called personification. Any questions on that one? No? Okay. So the next one is a simile. So this is what we both were just talking about earlier. So a simile is a comparison using like or as. And now there are two main comparisons that we're going to be talking about today, and a simile is different because of the words like and as. So keep those in mind when you're reading. If you see something that says like or as, it's probably a simile. So an example of this were, her eyes were as blue as the ocean. So as you can see here, it says as blue as the ocean. So that kind of gives you a hint that it's a simile. But if it said something like, her eyes were the ocean, that is not a simile because there's no like or as, but they are still being compared. Okay. Any questions? We good to go on? Good. Okay. Alright, so the next one is a metaphor. A metaphor is very similar to a simile, but the main difference is that there are no transitional phrases like or as. So this is more of a direct comparison between two objects, so you're comparing one thing to another by just saying that is the other thing. So an example of this is the world's a stage. The world is not really a stage, but you're comparing it to a stage in this because you're saying that, if you're reading this in a book, you're saying that the characters are like they're acting on a stage, or you're acting on the stage, but you're really just living your life. So that's the comparison that's there. Does that make sense? Yes. Perfect. Okay, and the next one is an alliteration. This is one of my favorites. So you probably have seen this a lot before. A lot of, rhymes and stuff that you'll have in elementary school are a lot of alliterations, but you just probably didn't know what that was at the time. So this is a repetition of sounds. So an example of this would be, Peter Piper picked a peck of peppers. Have any of you guys heard that before? She sells seashells by the seashore.
Yes.
Those are all alliterations. Do you notice how it's the patterns? Peter picked, or Piper picked a peck of peppers. There's all those P sounds in there. That kind of gives you a hint that it's an alliteration. Sometimes it'll just be one or two words, well, 2 or 3 words, but it's still an alliteration. And the next one, which I believe is the last one, is a hyperbole. So in a hyperbole, it's an exaggerated statement. Have you ever said, like, oh, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse?
Yes.
Or are you really going to eat a horse? Are you really going to eat a horse every day? Probably not. You're probably just very hungry, but it's just more of a fun and descriptive way to say I'm hungry, because saying I'm hungry when you're writing a story or book is boring, and that's going to get boring very fast. So by saying I'm so hungry I could eat a horse kind of adds more like drama, more dimension into your story. So if you're ever writing and you need to really take something to the next level, a hyperbole is a very good example that you could throw in there. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so that's actually the last one. And now, today, we're going to do a worksheet just to check your understanding. So I have a worksheet, and the first thing that's on here is a matching. So it gives you a word bank, and there's a couple in there that we have not talked about. So I'll try to trick you in there. But all 5 that we've went over are in here, and you can use your notes to help you if you need them. And then also I gave you examples of each of them, and I gave you choices. So just circle whichever one you think is right, and just let me know when you're done, and then we will go over the worksheet together. You all set?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go over it together in the
okay.
class, and then you can keep this. This will kind of be to go with your notes.
Okay.
So, the first, number 1, says blank is a comparison using like or as. Who had that one? Shelby?
Simile.
Very good job. And number 2, we'll go to Raina. So, giving an inanimate objects human-like qualities. What did you say that was?
Personification.
Perfect. All right, and back to Shelby. We'll just go every other. Shelby. The third one said a direct comparison between two objects. Which one did you say that was?
Metaphor.
Very good. That is a metaphor. And now, Raina, back to you. What is a repetition of sound?
An alliteration.
Yes, that is right. All right, and number 5, we'll go back to Shelby. What is an exaggerated statement?
A hyperbole.
Very good. Did the word bank kind of mess you up because there were a couple other thrown in there? Or do you think you got a pretty good handle on what you had to do there?
I think I got it. Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now we'll go back to Raina. So number 6 said Peter picked poisoned prunes. What did you say that one? Your options were alliteration, simile, metaphor, or personification.
Alliteration.
Very good. Does that make sense, both of you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Shelby? The lightning danced in the thunderstorm. Was that an alliteration, personification, an illusion, or a metaphor?
Personification.
Good job. That is personification. We see how lightning, again, doesn't have legs, doesn't have arms, can't really dance. It's not an alive object, but dancing is a human-like quality. All right, back to Raina. The world is my stage. I think that was very similar to what was in the PowerPoint. Was that an alliteration, personification, a simile, or a metaphor?
Metaphor.
That is right, and it's a metaphor. As we already went over, the world is not physically a stage, but it's comparing the world to the stage. Okay, we're going to go back to Shelby for this one. So it says, the cow was as white as milk. Do you know which one that would be? A simile, a metaphor, or personification?
A simile.
Yeah, very good. Do you know why it's not a metaphor?
Because it uses the word as.
Yeah, so if it were just to compare the cow to something white, that would not be a simile because there's no like or as in it. So that would be a metaphor. But in this case, we're saying the cow was as white as milk. That is a simile. And now the last one goes to Raina. So this one, once again, one of my favorites, says, my new shoes are killing me. Is that an illusion, a metaphor, a hyperbole, or a simile?
Hyperbole.
Exactly. Because are the shoes really killing you?
No.
No, they might feel like it, but they're not really. It's just a phrase. So do we have a good understanding on those? Is there any you want to go over that aren't a little, or you need to be more clear? No, we think we got them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think you could point these out if you're reading a book and you were to see something, you'd be like, oh, hey, that's a simile, that's a metaphor?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, the last thing we're going to do today before class is over is I have ticket out the doors. So, as you guys know, you can't leave until you do your ticket out the door. So what you're going to do is you can keep your worksheets, but I want you to close them because I don't want you to have your notes while you're doing these because it's kind of like a quiz, but not actually a quiz. I just want to make sure that you guys fully understand and that you can write your own versions of similes, metaphors, personification, hyperbole, alliteration, all that good stuff. So, I have 2 different ones. They're different. You cannot work with each other. Once you're done, raise your hand. I'll collect them, and you are all set to go. So we'll do that one, do that one. Just let me know when you're done. You all set?
Yeah.
Let me check it. Looks good. All right, you're all set to go. Are you all set?
Yes.
She said, "Oh, perfect. You're all set to go. Good job.